Hey everyone, I'm Quincy with the XDC Foundation. I'm here to talk to you about XDC 2.0 and how you can scale the future economies on it. So here we go. So let me give you the general pitch, right? XDC is an EVM-compatible layer 1 blockchain primarily focused on trade finance and the tokenization of real-world assets. Being able to take those assets and being able to bring them into a DeFi environment that we're all so comfortable with, right? Now also, XDC Network was one of the first blockchains to be invited to join the Trade Finance Distribution Initiative, which is just a conglomerate of banks all around the world that are coming together to further the future of trade finance. So it's quite interesting in my opinion. But in terms of 2.0, let's start talking about 1.0. So XDC is a delegated proof of stake blockchain. In terms of being able to stake on the blockchain, you need 10 million XDC tokens to be able to run a masternode. It's relatively crash tolerant, and it has a lot of the other niches that you would see in POS. Now, the thing that really makes 1.0 different than 2.0 is 2.0 actually requires multiple signatures from a quorum of masternodes to be able to authenticate for a block. And the biggest thing is going from DPoS, we're focusing on hot stuff as our new Byzantine fault tolerance consensus mechanism, primarily as a great tool to be able to allow for on-chain forensics. So that's one of the biggest things that's supposed to be emphasized in 2.0 is that the on-chain forensics capability is far superior than 1.0's capability. And that's primarily because of the hot stuff consensus mechanism. So 2.0, 2.0, state-of-the-art security, critically more secure, faster transaction finality. So merely 3 blocks for settlement, and each block is around 2 seconds, so you get 6 seconds of settlement times, and built for forensic monitoring. This is a huge point, and I'll emphasize why this is a huge point. So when dealing with a blockchain, you could almost look at it kind of like the branches of government. You have your legislative, executive, and your judicial, right? But on-chain, the legislative is the protocol design. This is the consensus. These are controls on the network. These are things that are built into the network. Executive, now normally in traditional economies, this would be an individual, but in automated economies, these are incentives. These are the gas fees. These are any sort of government's controls on sort of the network. And these essentially help run the network, these incentives. Now, when it comes to the judicial process, we kind of go, what is that? And one thing that we like to look at in terms of here at XDC is how are you able to monitor the network in the event of a malicious actor trying to attack the network? And what do you do if a malicious actor were to attempt the network? How do you move forward with all of the genuine participants, right? So we sort of had this idea of, well, what if we can give all of those participants enough tools to be able to identify the malicious actors and then allow them to be able to move accordingly based off that identification, whether that's not only the slash mechanisms baked in, but also if there were to be a day after, and this is sort of something that we use quite a bit here at XDC, if the network were to be compromised, like there would be a double spend attack, or if there would be something on chain, what would the honest participants do the day after? Well, if they have the tools to be able to recognize who the bad actors are and be able to easily audit those forensic tools, they could very easily roll back to a point in the network where it wasn't compromised, branch a fork with all of the honest participants, and continue the network forward as if the compromise may not have ever happened. And this is only capable if they have the tools to be able to identify who those compromising parties may be. This is a huge deal because not only do you need to have the tools to be able to manage the network while you're on the network, but you need to be able to have the tools to be able to identify things if things were also go wrong. That's also part of what makes the network secure. You can always go back and identify who the compromising parties are and be able to act accordingly with all the honest participants on chain. A little bit this goes into forensic monitoring, but the biggest thing I really wanted to emphasize on was the subnets. Now, this is really interesting, and the reason why I bring this up is the subnets, not only do they run off of the XDC 2.0 new XDC 2.0 consensus model, but also they allow for a new set of features to the XDC network. So you can almost look at the subnets as a layer 2 scaling solution. And you can almost look at that in which different organizations, whether they be enterprises, whether they be startups, different organizations can scale up their activities in their own private environment and allow for their ability to use blockchain technology without it necessarily being exposed to the public, while simultaneously being able to take some of that activity that they may have on that subnet and be able to migrate some of it over to the main chain, whether that be a set of wrapped assets, whether that be a collection of different trade partners that you may want to invite on your own subnet. It allows for a further level of engagement that wasn't necessarily possible. Now, these networks, the subnets have a few cool features. So not only do they have an extra layer of security, because there's a relayer that essentially publishes the headers of the blocks from the subnet to the mainnet, basically giving you an extra layer of security if someone wanted to compromise the subnet. They also have to reference the hashes on the mainnet. But also, these networks also operate as their own sovereign blockchains. So let's say, God forbid, something did happen to the main chain. All of your activity that is on your subnet is still able to maintain its own sovereign entity, allowing you to continue whatever sort of individualized processes that you were on that subnet without any sort of issues or any hiccups. Now, with the subnets, sort of like I stated before, they do run off of XDPOS 2.0. They are EVM compatible, just like the main chain. So all of your tools that you've been using on all your EVM chains also are able to track onto the subnets. And there are a collection of tools that have been built by the XDC community that allows for people to have a better experience with the subnets. Primarily a set of wallet tools that allow you to interact with the subnets and the mainnet, but also that relayer that adds for an extra layer of security. And these are just additional things that allow for people to adopt the blockchain without necessarily having to go through insane complexity to get that level of security, that level of sovereignty, and that level of interoperability. Now, the one thing I wanted to sort of emphasize on, I don't know if it was this slide then. One thing I wanted to emphasize on when it came to the subnets were the use of the subnets. And I stated before a little bit in terms of their ability to allow people to have their own private sort of accounting systems in which they're able to use a lot of the EVM technologies in an internal setting. But being able to have different organizations be able to have a safe environment to not only test the technology, but also offer services with the technology, while simultaneously being able to move those services or those assets or whatever sort of activity that may be on the subnet to participate with other subnets through the main chain is what I think is going to be one of the driving forces for adoption on XDC. There's a hesitancy of how you're able to manage assets on a public chain. So being able to have the ability to foster an environment for you to be able to manage those assets, and once you're finally able to engage with others, you can move those assets to the main chain as a medium to be able to engage with other subnets. I think what's going to end up happening is as there's a growth in not only the subnet usage, there's going to be a growth in the mainnet usage between a bunch of organizations using the mainnet to connect their subnets. And that's essentially the biggest thing I really wanted to emphasize, not only for the XDC network, not only for 2.0, but a new means of people being able to interact on the blockchain while being able to also have their own sovereignty, having their own privacy, and their own simplified means of being able to get themselves started with blockchain technology without necessarily taking on a bunch of the risk of dealing with the main chain directly. And when they do deal with the main chain, they have access to other parties that are also doing similar activities in their own subnets, and now using the main chain as that neutral means to now trade. And thank you, everyone. That was the biggest thing I wanted to talk about in terms of XDC, the future growth of scaling economies, and the new releases and new interesting things that come from 2.0 and subnets. Thank you, everyone. Hope you have a good day.